everybody, welcome back to Frailing at Life with me, Banjo Jen. Hope you're all doing okay. Today I wanted to move on to thinking about different chords. The last sort of few episodes, well the very first few episodes that I did was all based around that Frailing strum and really practicing that, so I hope that's coming more naturally now. And we were focusing on the G chord, the open G, the C and the D7. So today I want to kind of go over the sort of more full D chord and the different ways of playing that. And also the other chord shapes that can move up and down the neck and kind of what that means. There's some that are a lot easier than others. Obviously you can print yourself out a chord chart. There's loads available. I don't need to go through every single kind of chord with you. You can sort of work that out by printing out some charts. And kind of it shows you where to put your fingers on which fret and what chord it makes. But I just thought I'd run through some of them and some of the more useful kind of features of knowing what chords go together and where to sort of put your fingers on the fretboard that might make more sense for certain things. So starting with that D chord, we've been playing the D7, which is just that 2-finger version up on the 1st and 2nd fret. But you're going to want to be able to use a fuller D chord, not just the 7th version of it. So what you're going to do, I'm going to do, there's a few different kinds actually. I'll show you the 3-fingered one first. So if you put your index finger on the 3rd string up on the 2nd fret, just there, and then your middle finger on the 2nd string on the 3rd fret, and then for now put your ring finger on the 1st string at the 4th fret. Okay, so you've got something that looks like a kind of diagonal line with your fingers. Now that is a perfectly good D chord. Okay, you'll see a lot of diagrams on the chord charts where this ring finger comes over to the bass string and it's your little finger that sits on the 1st string. So that's the sort of 4-fingered version of the D chord. Now that's, I feel, really hard to grab, that chord shape. And I also hardly ever use that because your bass string is already a D, okay? So if you leave that string open and just pluck that bass string, you've got your low D there, okay? And if you're playing, going back to the 3-fingered one, so I use my ring finger on that 1st string, 4th fret, it gives you a really nice D chord using that bass D. Whereas if you do the 4-fingered version, the sort of full chord, you're making another F sharp on that bass string, so you're kind of making the same note as that 1st string, because they're just both D strings, one's lower and one's higher. So if we're fretting them both at the 4th fret, we're making 2 F sharps, one lower, one higher. So that, you know, that's what they'll show you in a lot of the chord charts, but actually I like to use the bass. I certainly find, especially if you're playing songs, which is what I do, you want to use that bass string as much as possible without making it too much higher, because it's the only bass you've got on a banjo. You think about a guitar and you've got a couple of, you know, deeper strings and you get that really sort of full sound when you strum a guitar because there's quite a lot of bass to it. A banjo is naturally a very high instrument because we don't have, you know, we only have those 4 main strings, and so that bass D, I always think if you can let it ring as it's supposed to, as the bass, personally I find that nicer because you've got a bit more of a, you know, there's just a bit more meat to the sound because it's a bit lower. So I usually would go for that 3-fingered version of the D. So leave the bass string open, so you've got it already on the bass D, and then 3 fingers making the rest of the notes, okay? So that's a D that you may want to put in where we've been playing the D7 before. So if you've been playing along with songs kind of G, C and D7, maybe now try putting that D in. It's going to be a bit weird at first because you've been used to grabbing the D7 up here, but practice that D. So it might be that, what did we do when we did Old Crow Medicine Show, when we did Take 'Em Away, and we were using the D7, we were going, take 'em away, Lord, take away these chains from me. So now you could try exactly the same thing, but instead of that D7, try putting the 3-fingered D. So it'd be, take 'em away, Lord, take away these chains from me. Okay, and try replacing the D7, and you can do that with other songs if you've been practicing the D7. Try putting that fuller D in there now. I also often only play a 2-fingered D chord, so this is where I would do the first 2 fingers of that chord we've just done, but I would leave off the ring finger, because again, you've got a natural D here on that first string. If you leave it open, it's a high D. So if you play a 2-fingered D chord, so you've just got your index finger, 3rd string, 2nd fret, middle finger, 2nd string, 3rd fret, you get what I call a power D, because you're taking out the F sharps. You're not fretting those on that 4th fret. So you've got a kind of chord there that's made up just of sort of 2 notes, and I find that particularly in my own songs, when I play, I often use this power D, and then what that means is you can sometimes add that ring finger onto the 1st string, sorry. So if you take it sort of on and off, you can hear that difference. So I quite like playing the 2-fingered D, because then I can choose whether I sort of add that on. And in the next session we'll look at Hammer-Ons and Pull-Offs, which are the sort of bits that start to add a lot of flavour to your playing, which is what I'm sure you're probably wanting to get to. So it means if you're playing a 2-finger D, got that ring finger free to sometimes use that 1st string fretted and sometimes leave it open. You can also pull that ring finger across to the bass string like we talked about to bring your F sharp over there. So sometimes you might stretch it. So I find that 2-fingered D chord quite useful. Also, if you're struggling kind of getting all 3 fingers on the fretboard at first, maybe start off with that 2-fingered version, and then when you get used to that, start adding in that ring finger on the 1st string. So that's your D. You're going to use that a lot because, again, a lot of songs, especially in the key of G, you're going to use your G, your C, your D chord. That D shape, the good thing about a banjo as opposed to a guitar or something that isn't in open tuning, remember we've got this free G chord because we're in open tuning. That means we can move chord shapes up the neck in exactly the same position, and it'll kind of climb a step all the time. So if you've got your D shape where it is making a D, as it does, if you move that up, let's say to where you've got your index finger up on the 5th fret now, where your 5th string peg is, okay, so it's that same shape, but I've moved it up 1, 2, 3 frets along. That's now making an F chord with the first 3 strings. If you're moving it up the neck, you would have to add in that bass string though to do that properly, because ideally you want to be able to hit all 4 strings, not just the first 3. So you'd have to do that 4-fingered D shape, but you can take it up the neck. So you're playing an F there. If I take it 2 further along, we've got a G. we've got a fretted G. Okay. So there's a few things like that on the banjo. The easiest one is the bar chord. Because we're in open G, if we put our finger all the way across the strings, so if I do that on the 2nd fret, I am literally just, you know, covering all 4 strings. We've now got an A, because we've moved up a step. We talked about that last time. These are half steps moving up. So we've moved up a full step to the A chord, okay? So that is a really easy chord to practice because you're just putting your finger across the string. When I say easy, you know, at first it still might feel a little bit weird because you need to decide whereabouts on your finger it feels most comfortable. I've seen people kind of put in the very flat of their finger across. I find that really hard because it makes my wrist hurt. It feels like my wrist is kind of twisting to get my finger flat. So I find I tend to use more the side of my finger rather than the sort of very kind of fleshy bit on the bottom. I'd kind of use the bone on the side. So I sort of roll my finger slightly, not totally on its side, but somewhere between, you know, being flat and being on its side, sort of. I just find that easier to hold down, but you just need to play around with that and find whichever sort of feels the most comfortable for you, because you're gonna, you know, you're gonna want your wrist not to be like in a painful position. So that's an A if you bar it, okay? And that means that, again, because we're in open tuning, we can just move that bar right up the frets and play different chords. So the 2nd fret is an A, each one's a half step, so if we go up to the next one, you get a B flat, or an A sharp, interchangeable really, B flat, and then a B, and then a C. So at the 5th fret, if you're barring across those 4 strings, you've now got another version of the C chord. So we've got the C chord with the 3 fingers up here that we've been practicing. That's probably the one you're going to use most often, but if you want a different version of the C chord, you've got one up there on the 5th fret. If you then move 2 more to the 7th fret, you've got another version of D. So again, you might play your D here a lot of the time, and then you might move it up to the 7th fret. If you want a higher D, you can just bar it, okay? So those bar chords can move all the way up. You can play them right up here, an F and a G. I don't do that very often, but I certainly do it occasionally. If I want some higher up the neck chords, I can use the bar because it's very fast to grab. You know, you're not sort of doing too much fancy finger work. You're just barring it at the right fret and you're getting another chord. One final shape that you can do that with in the major chords. So there's sort of 3 different shapes for your major chords. The easiest one's the bar. The other one is that D shape that we talked about. And then there's the F shape. This one I found really tricky at first. Maybe you'll find it easy, I don't know, but I certainly took a while to get my fingers around this one. So to make an F chord, you're going to put your your index finger on the 2nd string at the 1st fret. You're going to put your middle finger on the 3rd string at the 2nd fret. Your ring finger comes across to the bass string on the 3rd fret, and your little finger is going to put down that remaining 1st string also on the 4th fret, okay? So it sort of looks like that. Now, because it's using all 4 fingers, that is quite difficult to grab, and so the F chord is going to take some practice, I would say. But once you've got that shape, that is another one that you can just move up and down the neck. So if I move that 2 along, that's another G chord. We've moved up a step from F to G, so that's yet another version of the G chord that you can play if you want to. If you want to move it right up the neck, this shape I sometimes use for C and D higher up. So I'm coming right up to this fret, that's a C chord, 2 up further, really high D chord, okay? So they're alternative versions of your sort of G, C and D that you can play with that F-shaped chord. It is a bit tricky though, that one. That's one I'll come back to in another episode because it's really cool for a slightly more bluegrassy sound, is that shape, because you can do a really good hammer-on and come up the neck with it. So we'll kind of come back to that, but that's, you know, I don't want to bombard you with too many chords for now, but if you start looking at some of the chord charts and you see some of these shapes, hopefully just sort of reading the chart and sort of playing along with this will just help you kind of get it in your head, kind of where those shapes are on the neck. Then we can start moving into minor territory, of course. You know, if you've learnt your major chords that you might be using, quite often you're going to want to use minor chords as well. So things like A minor is a beautiful chord. My personal favourite, I'd say A minor is probably my second favourite, but D minor is my absolute favourite chord on the banjo. Beautiful. So just like you can move the major chords up and down the scale, there are certain minor shapes that you can use as well. I'm not really going to go through all those this time round because I think we've got enough to just sort of learn some of the major ones. What I'd start with is definitely get used to the other version of D, so you're not playing D7 anymore, you're playing a full D. Try and get to grips with barring chords so that you can play an A, you can play a C, a D, etc. as you move up. They're really handy, and if you can get round to it, you know, try that 4-fingered version of an F shape. So an F is when it's up on those first frets, and then, like I say, you can move it along for G and stuff like that. We talked about a capo last time, so obviously you can put a capo on at different frets to raise the key without playing a different chord. So if we knew something in G that we've been playing and we use C and D with that, if we want to raise it up to the key of A, we can just put the capo on that second fret. Did I bring my capo? Oh yeah, there it is. So we can just put the capo, like last time, onto that sort of second fret, and then when we play a G chord, we've now moved it up. So if we're playing open, that's now an A, and we can still play our C shape and our D shape, but we've moved it up to A. However, I think, like I mentioned last time, it's not always the right thing to do to put a capo on. It can make it a lot easier if you know something that's using G, C and D, for example, and you just want to raise it a key, that's cool, put the capo on and do that. But some songs, you know, you might actually want to learn to play in that key rather than just using the capo. So the D that we've just learned, we talked a bit last time about the 1-4-5 progression. So in any key, you've got you know, a starting note. So if we're in the key of G, G is your starting note, note 1. G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. That's your scale of G. So the 4th and the 5th note are C and D. So we said 1-4-5 chords mean G, C and D chords. And 1-4-5 chords always work really nicely together. So you'll hear loads of songs with those sort of collection of chords, and each key will have a different 1-4-5. So let's say we're concentrating on D because we've learnt that D chord. If we're going to count up the notes in the scale of D, then the 4th and the 5th chord would be G and A. So A is that bar chord at the 2nd fret. So it might be that there are songs that suit your voice or that you just want to play along to that are in the key of D. So maybe rather than putting a capo on and playing your C chord and stuff, we'll actually learn it in D and use G and A, because they're quite easy chords. We've got the free G already, we've been learning the D, the A is just a bar, so we can already play that. So let's say, what do I know in D? About a bit of Creedence. I see a bad moon rising. I see trouble on the way. I see earthquakes and lightning. I see bad times today. Don't go around tonight, 'cause it's bound to take your life. There's a bad moon on the rise. So I would play that in D just because that sort of suits my voice. But that was literally just D, A and G. Again, 1, 4, 5. So many songs just use the 3 chords. They might chuck a minor in there as well, but it's often those 3 chords. So, you know, now that you know a few different chords and you can practice some of those shapes, the world's your oyster in terms of songs. You're going to be able to play loads of different songs because you'll know the chords. Whether you choose to put a capo on or whether you choose to actually learn the chords of whatever key you want to play, then either way is great. But yeah, just practice those different shapes. So practice the D, do all different ways. Try the 2-fingered one, the power D that I often play. Add in the 3rd finger. Or if you want to try the full 4-finger shape, it means your little finger's going to be on that 1st string, your ring finger's going to come across to the bass string. Okay, so all different versions of D there. Your bar chord's easy. And then always come back to your free G. Just to mention as well with G, if you put just 1 finger on the 1st string at a couple of places, you get a slightly different sound as well. So open, you've got your G. If you put your finger on the 1st string at the 5th fret, you're finishing the chord off with a higher note. You're now making it the same as your drone string. So sometimes you might want to have that little high note in there. I think I might have just done that with Bad Moon Rising. Bad times today. Don't go around tonight, it's bound to take your life. See, I went up there, I'm still just playing a G chord, but I took my finger up to that 5th fret just on that 1st string because I wanted it to go up a little bit. Okay, so that's something you can add into the G that you already know. The other thing you can do with a G is if you put, again, the 1st string, but fret it at the 3rd fret, gives you a G7. And if you're playing in the key of G, usually a G7 means your next chord is going to be a C. It kind of resolves to a C usually after a G7, okay? So you'll hear that sometimes quite a lot in songs with the 1, 4, 5 progression. You might hear that sort of G7 before it goes to the C. Yeah, so you'll just listen to loads of songs and just sort of try and work stuff out. One way to get really good at kind of just, you know, getting to grips with chords is listen to songs that you like and just try the different chords that you know and see if you can make them match. So you're listening and you're trying to kind of work out what chords are in a song. Try and do that before you just go straight onto Google and find out what chords are in a song. That's always useful, and I've done that many a time. But if you can put in a bit of time and just kind of try listening and just try and work out the chords, again, it's training your ear that we keep talking about, the importance of singing while you're playing. It's training the ear all the time to kind of listen to stuff. And that's a journey that I'm still on. I don't count myself as a natural musician at all. I have had to work at this, like really work at it. It doesn't come natural to me. I'm not one of these people that picks up an instrument and just listens to something and goes, oh yeah, da-da-da-da-da, and can play. Those people make me sick. I wish I was one of them, but I'm not. But you know, the more that you just try and train your ear, the better you get at it. I'm better than when I started. I've still got a long way to go, but it's something I would suggest you just try and do as much as possible. So that's it for today. Practice a load of different chords, and then next time we'll start getting a bit fancier. We'll start putting the stuff in with this left hand, not just the chords, but some little tricks as well. All right, see you next time.